There's an event tomorrow that you may be attending down in Washington, an address from President Trump to the Joint Session of Congress. What are you most going to be listening for in that address?
What I expect him to do is to try to explain and defend his first 5.5 weeks as president. It's been a tumultuous period. He dismissed his acting attorney general. His executive order on the Muslim ban and travel was at least delayed, if not stricken, by 3 different federal courts. And his national security advisor resigned. He has attacked the press. He has attacked the judiciary. It's been a nonstop tweet war. And I assume that he's going to try to convert that experience into what he's characterized as a fine-tuned machine in the first 5.5 weeks.
He certainly has come to office with an agenda that he wants to advance. And when you look at that agenda, one of the things that's of particular interest to our audience is tax reform. There's a lot that you can disagree with Republicans generally and specifically with President Trump on. But surely the Democrats, in principle, are in favor of tax reform. Is there some place you can meet him and work with him and enact tax reform for all of us?
I guess what I'm looking for is for his tax reform plan to conform with his campaign promise. He talked a lot about the struggling working family in America in terms of trade, in terms of taxes, in terms of government regulation. If the tax reform plan is going to help that struggling working family, I think there's room for Democratic support. If it goes back to the other theory that if we give tax breaks to the wealthiest, somehow it will trickle down to the working families, we're in for the same old script.
And in fairness, I think if he were here, he would say that that was an important part of the base that elected him, was the working class.
Yes, it is.
It was not the upper class.
Yes, it is.
So let's assume for the moment we can get past the class warfare issue. Are the Democrats willing to take on some of the difficult issues about eliminating some deductions in order to pay for reductions in the rates?
Now you get into tricky territory, even for Republicans, because the most important deductions really have strong constituencies within our personal tax code, whether it's state and local taxes that we're paying, charitable contributions, interest deductions and such. Each of these has a strong constituency, not easy to touch. Now, candidate Trump talked about eliminating carried interest. Sign me up. Right. And for most Democrats. And it's a lucrative way to bring resources into tax reform. Other questions about repatriating foreign profit. How will you do it? At what tax rate? What impact is it going to have ultimately on the economy? There are sources of revenue that Democrats can support relative to certain deductions. When you get into the personal deductions, tough territory.
Well, the last time we had fundamental tax reform probably was when Bill Bradley was serving the Senate, and he was a Democrat who was willing to work with the Reagan administration to get that done. Are you and the Senate Democratic leadership willing, in principle, to say everything is on the table, things that we love, things that you love, so that we can reach a compromise to really enact effective tax reform?
I think it's a starting point. But I would say the first starting point for us goes back to the income inequality, which candidate Trump spoke about over and over again. We want to make sure that working families in this country have a fighting chance. The tax code can help them achieve that.
One of the things that the Republicans have said repeatedly, ever since it was enacted with the Affordable Care Act, is we need to get rid of it. That is clearly one of the items high on their agenda. Again, is there room for reform of the ACA that the Democrats could work with the Republicans on?
The only perfect law that I've ever heard of was brought down on the side of a mountain by Senator Moses on clay tablets. I voted for the Affordable Care Act. I'm proud of the fact it's reduced the uninsured in America to the lowest levels in recorded history. But yes, it could be improved. The fact is that the reason why many insurance companies are dropping out, the fact is why premiums are rising, is we need to engage more people into buying insurance, especially healthy young people. That part we should work on together.
One of the nasty problems about your job is that whenever you have a good program, you got to pay for it. You got to come up with the money for it. As you look overall at an outline that we're going to get, we believe today, of the budget, do you think that we should be prepared to increase deficit spending given how much deficit we already have?
That's a painful choice to make, but you have to ask some fundamental questions. Would we increase deficit spending to provide for the security and defense of the United States? Absolutely. Would I increase deficit spending to provide for education, training, and research? Absolutely. Those are the fundamentals of economic growth as far as I'm concerned. Add infrastructure into that list.
Finally, Senator, one of the biggest issues, I think, in Washington is, can the White House work with Congress on both sides, Republicans and Democrats? You have Republicans in the majority on both the House and the Senate, but there seems to be some disagreement, even division, between the White House and the Republicans on the Hill, having to do with Russia. What is the likelihood that that will become a divisive issue between the two ends of Pennsylvania Avenue? Put aside Democrats and Republicans.
Unless we take seriously what the Russians just attempted to do in our last presidential campaign, I believe it calls into question our sincerity on a lot of fronts. I just returned from a visit to Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine. A Polish leader said to me, if you won't take it seriously that Putin tried to upend your election and influence the result, how are you going to take it seriously if he decides to invade our country? Are you willing to step up at that point? So this is a test of our will about whether we want to protect our sovereignty when it comes to Russian intervention.
There's a Senate committee investigating it.
An intelligence committee.
And is that where it's going to get handled?
No, I don't think it'll be handled as well as it could be. They had what might have been a hearing last week. We're not sure. They brought in perhaps FBI Director Comey. We're not sure. If we're going to have real answers that the American people can trust, it needs to be an independent, transparent process. The intelligence committees are not the place for that.